Good afternoon. Welcome to Sunday Profile. Today we are getting into the word and celebrating the 60th anniversary of the most iconic bossa nova album ever released. GetzGilberto, recorded in 1963, released worldwide in 1964 by Verve Records and awarded with 4 Grammys, plus 6 other nominations in 1965. The album turned bossa nova into a pop phenomenon and popularized the careers of João Gilberto, Stan Getz, and Antônio Carlos Jobim. Astrid Gilberto became a pop icon, personified as the girl from Ipanema. For the first time in the Grammy history, a jazz album was awarded Album of the Year. For the first time in history, a jazz single was awarded Record of the Year, with the crossover smash of The Girl from Ipanema, become one of the biggest hit recording jazz has ever known. GetzGilberto is still the best and most successful bossa nova recorder of all times, remaining 96 on the Billboard Pop chart, reaching number 2. Released as a single, The Girl from Ipanema peaked at number 5, helping the album to receive a total of 10 Grammy nominations and 4 awards. Our guest today is Arnaldo DeSouteiro, a historian, a Brazilian record producer, worked with all the Brazilian artists that recorded with the GetzGilberto, João Gilberto, Antônio Carlos Jobim, Astrid Gilberto, drummer Milton Banana, and bassist Sebastião Neto, as well with the album producer Criteiro for 20 years. Mr. DeSouteiro was responsible for all the CTI rain shoes in Japan and also worked as a tailor creative consultant in the USA, supervising the CTI releases on CD format in the USA by Sony Music. He has also worked compilations such as the best-selling series A Trip to Brazil, Brazilian Horizons, CTI Acid Jazz Grooves, and Jazz Club. DeSouteiro was João Gilberto music consultant for over 2 decades, producing records and writing screenplays for concerts and TV broadcasts. He also produces Jobim last recording session for Itamar Corac's album Rio Vermelho, Red River in 1994. We start this profile today playing Só Danço Samba. This is from the re-release on CD in 1997, who has all the research done by our own Phil Sharp here from WKCR. Everybody knows Phil Sharp, and I was here when he was involving in the creation of this reinshoe of GetzGilberto. And later on, I'm going to play an interview with Phil Sharp talking about this album that he did. Over here at WKCR Studios, he had one of those ovens that cook the tape, because the MGA Studios, one of the tapes, because we're going to talk with Arnaldo, because it's many tapes. I thought was only one tape. Is many tapes were recorded at that time by Phil Ramon. But our phone number here, it's 212-854-9920, and a happy Father's Day to everybody. So let's put on, see if Arnaldo is there already. Arnaldo, you are there? I have to contact him. See if the contact or the phone is right. He's in Rio de Janeiro, the marvelous city. Let's see. Yes. So let's continue here with our profile. We try to connect with Arnaldo DeSouteiro, a special guest. Hello, Arnaldo. Yeah, 1 second. We have some technical difficulties here. 1, 2, 3. Arnaldo, what you doing, my friend? So let's play another track until we get in touch with Arnaldo DeSouteiro and Rio de Janeiro, the marvelous city. Hello, Arnaldo. Hello, Arnaldo. Hello, man.
Hello?
Oh, now we
Are
got
you
it.
listening to me?
Yes, we got it now,
I
man.
don't I don't listen to you.
Okay, can you listen now? Yeah?
Oh, okay.
Yes? You do it?
I'm listening using a second
Okay.
cell phone
It is a,
because
yeah,
I'm
okay.
on the WhatsApp that I'm talking. I don't listen to you.
All right, but anyway, let's do. I just did the introduction and I play So Danço Samba from the album that Phil Sharp did the research. This was released in 1997, the GetzGilberto album. And I open up with So Danço Samba for you to do your
Hmm.
introduction about why So Danço Samba.
Oh, first of all, thanks so much for the invitation. You know how much I'm a big fan of everybody. No? You, João Gilberto, Stan, Jobim, all the musicians on the album, and everybody. And I love it always, the album since my childhood. I know that I have some copies from the original papers used in the recording and everything. So, Só Danço Samba was the first song recorded on that famous March 1863. You know, in the first session, it was the first song recorded, Só Danço Samba.
So in this sequence inside the studio, Phil Ramon is very interesting when you put you were talking about your master classes that you did in Brazil about the atmosphere inside the studio at that time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think that is fantastic because Phil used no headphones. He tried to do create a very intimate atmosphere for the musicians in the studio at A&R Studios. And using no baffles, you know, no separation, and Stan Getz facing João Gilberto and Antônio Carlos Jobim while performing. And Jobim was on the upper left side of the studio on the piano. So he really created a mood like if they were performing in a nightclub. That's awesome, you know, fantastic idea because it reflected on the music, on the way it was recorded.
Let's continue with this GetzGilberto celebration here of the 60 years of the release of the album. What about who was responsible, you think, for the repertoire of the album?
Oh, I think that was basically João Gilberto, and of course, Jobim also had some suggestions, but the person who decided to mix the bossa songs like Girl from Ipanema and Desafinado with old sambas like Doralice by Dorival Caymmi and O Grande Amor by Jobim, and also especially para machucar meu coração, né? By Ari Barroso. It was very interesting, you know, mix, and they had a little preparation in some rehearsals that took place at Carnegie Hall. So when they arrived at the studio at A&R, they were already with a sound and with a concept, you know, and that was Creed Taylor's idea also, of course, that he needed to have a saxophone master or a jazz soloist playing with the Brazilian musicians. That was the great idea of the whole thing, you know, that to put them together.
So Creed Taylor had already one hit in his hand with the Bossa Nova, with the Jazz Samba album with Charlie Bird. He talked to you about he already had in mind to record another Bossa Nova album?
Oh yeah, of course. And Creed told me sometimes there are versions that he wasn't at the Carnegie Hall personally, but he told me that he soon after the Carnegie Hall concert he decided to sign the most important Brazilian artists at that time, and that the ones they were the ones that who impressed him more than everything. You know, Luiz Bonfa, of course, Jobim, and Gilberto. Luiz Bonfa because of the Black Orpheus soundtrack that had already been a hit, and the movie was a global hit. That explains why the first Brazilian artist that worked with Creed Taylor was Luiz Bonfá in '62. In December '62, they recorded Luiz Bonfá's first album for Verve Records. That's titled Luiz Bonfá Plays and Sings Bossa Nova. The composer of Black Orpheus plays and sings Bossa Nova. And he recorded with the members of the Oscar Castro Neves Quartet that had backed him at the Carnegie Hall concert in November '62. And at the suggestion of Creed Taylor, he had Lalo Schifrin doing the arrangements, the orchestral arrangements. And of course, that was followed by the second Bonfá album with Getz in February '63, and with Jobim guesting as pianist and rhythm guitarist in some tracks. The famous Jazz Samba Encore that was also very successful. The album spent 3 months, 11 weeks on the Billboard Pop chart. And it's interesting also to note that Maria Helena Toledo was the first singer that recorded with Stan Getz, because it happened on the session with Bonfá in February '62, 1 month prior to Astrud Gilberto.
Talking about the tapes, I have the box set of the Verve release in Germany. There is, I think, 4 LPs, vinyls. And I'm interested in how many tapes they record at that time, because they have this restoration did here by Phil Schaap. There was the MGM tape that they found on the vouchers of MGM when MGM was on fire. How many tapes you think were recorded at that time? Master tapes.
Yeah. Speaking of recording tapes, at least 2 tapes exist, because Phil Ramone decided to record simultaneously on 2 machines at the studio. So he recorded on a 3-track tape using 8 mics, 8 microphones, and he at the same time recorded in a stereo machine, you know. And he did the following. He did separated 2 mics for Stan Getz using a Telefunken U47, 1 mic for Jobim on the piano, just one mic for Sebastião Neto on the bass, 2 mics for Milton Banana, just one overhead for the drums and one on the snare, and 1 mic for João Gilberto, positioned between the voice, the vocal, his face, and the acoustic guitar. And of course, when Astrud Gilberto participated on 2 tracks, he added 1 microphone for Astrud. And he used it to mix and recorded everything in double speed, what explains the great quality of the recording sound. And he earned a Grammy because of this also, you know, because he recorded in double speed, and Verve Records, the bosses, didn't like, because he used too much tape, you know. And he decided to do a separation that was Stan Getz on the center. Well, in the 3-track machine, it was Stan Getz on the center for the solos, and Jobim and on the left, and João Gilberto on the right side with the musicians with bass and drums.
Why still nowadays when the back cover of this CD that I have in my hands, the 97 Verve re-release, with all the research and things, they still have Tommy Williams as the bass player. Mm-hmm. Why? They cannot reveal the real bass player? Why is not the name of Sebastião Neto involved?
And other mistakes. Because the original album, everything starts with the original album. That was that beautiful gatefold cover, and I love the liner notes that were also nominated for for the Grammy. Jobim and João Gilberto and Stan Getz were nominated because of the liner notes, along with the liner notes by Gene Lees. And the musicians are mentioned on the liner notes. But Creed Taylor had to do it in a very subtle way, because the American Federation of Musicians was acting aggressively, in a very aggressive way, against the musicians, Brazilian musicians that were trying to work in the United States at that time. I have a downbeat interview with Gene Lees from 1962 that he speaks clearly about the problems that the American Federation of Musicians were creating for Jobim, even to participate in TV programs and TV broadcasts with Jerry Mulligan and everybody, because the musicians could play but could not be paid. You know, they were even saying, "Oh, if you play and you receive a payment, you'll be arrested." And so, but anyway, in the liner notes, Milton Banana, Astrude, and Sebastião Neto are mentioned. Okay. Fast forward many, many years later, when the album began to be reissued a lot, they eliminated the gatefold cover and eliminated the liner notes. So the names of Milton Banana and Tião Neto kind of disappeared from the recording. And then I remember that in 1986, I was invited by Verve and by Polygram Brazil, when Ezio Servolo was the jazz director in Brazil, and his assistant also was a very important person. It was the beginning of the digital era, the CD era. They invited me to do the first digital issue of GetzGilberto. And I remember that I called João, and he helped me with some information. And we prepared a beautiful press release that was printed like a small book, a 4-page booklet that was distributed to press and to everybody, along with the CD that was made in Germany, but because there were no factories in Brazil, but it was also released on vinyl that was pressed in Brazil. So until 1986, everything was corrected, you know, regarding the information of the musicians. But I don't know who started this crazy thing that they started to say that Tommy Williams was the bass player. And it's sad, because this beautiful reissue that you mentioned, that is the 97 one on Verve, that has been Ben Young and Michael Lang and Phil Sharp, but the problem with keep mentioning Tommy Williams, because they don't know about Sebastião Neto, sorry, you know. And then I remember that in 1988, I was invited by Verve once again to do a compilation series called A Trip to Brazil. And then, of course, to celebrate the 40 years of Bossa Nova. And then for the first time, once again, I, of course, included one of the tracks was The Girl from Ipanema from the GetzGilberto album. And in my liner notes, just before the info of the track, I corrected everything. So I think that even in the English Wikipedia, there's a reference that I was the person who cleared the facts, that once again I said, man, no Tommy Williams, please, It's the bassist is Sebastião Neto and the drummer is Milton Banana, because they were essential for the success of the album. I think that this album is so perfect and it was so perfectly conceived and performed that one person different there would change completely the sound, Tião Neto played in a very unobtrusive way, very subtle bass player, very few notes, like Ron Carter maybe would have done. Milton Banana played very soft, like João Gilberto asked him to do. And Jobim very economic on the piano, like almost a single note, and sometimes improvising on block chords in octaves. And Stan Getz very lyrical, trying to do his best to adapt his sound and his style to the Brazilian musicians. And it was very important because the Bonfá album had been the first one that Getz had recorded with Brazilian musicians. And it makes a big difference from the first Jazz Samba album. From Jazz Samba to Jazz Samba Encore, the difference on the swing is different because for the first time you have the Brazilian musicians performing the rhythm tracks. And then with GetzGilberto, I think that was the perfection was achieved because they were a really superheroes and a super fantastic quintet. It's unbelievable what they did, what they achieved there. And the atmosphere, the mood, and João Gilberto intonations, and his vocal, the quality of the sound that Phil Ramone was responsible for, and of course Astrud, that she was the ice on the cake, to say the least.
So let's play the second track that we're going to play now. We play first Danço Samba. That was the first recording at the studio at that time. What is the second one that you think?
Oh, curiously, the second one was Garota de Ipanema, was Girl from Ipanema.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then becomes the story. I don't know if you want to talk about the story now or later, but the fact is that the Norman Gimbel lyrics were already prepared. Since Creed Taylor had listened to the song, he felt that the song was great and that they deserved English lyrics. And of course, Jobim was already connected with Norman Gimbel, so Norman Gimbel provided the English lyrics. And the only thing that happened was that João Gilberto didn't want to sing in English. That's what he told me, The story may be different, maybe, but what he told me, and after 20 years of friendship and working with him off and on as a freelancer, was that he had the lyrics and he thought that it was a great idea to have Astrud Gilberto singing the lyrics because she was very fluent in English, at least for Brazilian standards at that time. And she was working with him, assisting with him in New York. Of course, they were married, they were in love, but Astrud was helping João Gilberto a lot. She traveled with him to the Carnegie Hall concert and stayed with him there. And he liked rehearsal. He did a rehearsal, an intimate rehearsal at the hotel with Astrud. And said to her, okay, during the recording sessions, I will suggest that you could record the English lyrics and let's see how they react, you know. Some people say that Stan Getz was in one of these rehearsals in the hotel, but then they had the rehearsals at the Carnegie Hall. And then, of course, I think that the suggestion was done, but Astrud wasn't in these rehearsals. So the first time that everybody really listened to Astrud Gilberto singing The Girl from Ipanema in English was at the A&R studios at the time of the recording. And of course, everybody loved, you know. They fell in love immediately with Astrud singing. Getz thought that would be great. And Jobim was a little surprised, but said, okay. And Creed Taylor, of course, said, oh, fantastic. Finally, we can have someone doing the English lyrics, because he was planning to give the song to Sarah Vaughan. It's a long story, you know. Phil Ramone says that he wanted Sarah Vaughan to record it first, you know. But Sarah didn't want to sing the girl. She wanted to sing the boy from Ipanema. So Astrud did it, and it was, I think, one-of-a-kind phenomenon in the industry of music, because it was her first recording ever, you know, and it's so beautiful, it's so charming, you know, it's so seductive, it's so musical, you know, and it's perfect, you know. And then later, of course, we have we have to talk about how Creed conceived the singles that he featured more Astrud Gilberto than João Gilberto on The Girl from Ipanema, etc. But the complete track, I think it's a masterpiece that changed the music forever, changed the way the bossa nova was noted in the USA, changed the way that bossa nova was perceived and understood by American musicians. You know, it was a second period for bossa nova in the universe, and the first time that bossa nova was really properly recorded and played with all the charm that she has, you know.
Okay, I'm going to play The Girl from Ipanema from a different format on vinyl, on LP. This from the box set Stan Getz, The Girl from Ipanema, The Bossa Nova Years, featuring Antônio Carlos Jobim, João Gilberto, Astrud Gilberto. And this album has 5 albums on this box set that was released in 1984 by Polygram Records and Hanover, West Germany. This is all released by Verve on Germany. Right? So you can see the difference. Like Arnaldo said about the set of the microphones, where it was on the right side, on the left side of your stereo. You were in tune with Sunday Profiles, with the music of the GetzGilberto album, WKCR FM New York, WKCR HD, and we are talking with Arnaldo DeSouteiro, the historian, record producer who works with Jobim, João Gilberto, Milton Banana, and many people involved with the GetzGilberto album. He's on the line from Rio de Janeiro. So let's put Arnaldo again and talk about the way I felt when I first interviewed Creed Taylor, and I think it was in 98, and I talked about that before, analyzing the whole process. There really was Creed Taylor was the man who have the lucky man, the package, the bossa nova for the whole world. I give him this credit because a lot of people, you know, let's talk to Arnaldo. He also analyzed this situation and worked for Creed Taylor for more than 20 years. Talk about Arnaldo.
Oh, I agree perfectly with you, totally with you, Jassvan, because Creed Taylor was really a visionary producer, and he worked in a very high standard level, a very high level. And sometimes it would be interesting for us to remember how was Bossa Nova at the time that Creed Taylor entered the scene, because Bossa Nova officially started in 58, with the great albums that João Gilberto made in Brazil, that fabulous trilogy of albums that had been already released in the USA. Of course, the musicians, the jazz musicians especially, were completely fascinated by those João Gilberto albums. And then some musicians started to record Bossa Nova, some of them in USA, and some then even tried to come to Brazil to record Bossa Nova, like Herbie Mann, that did a very good album, by the way. It was one of the best ones, called Herbie Mann does the Bossa Nova, do the Bossa Nova, something like that, with Antônio Carlos Jobim, and Dom Romão, Luiz Carlos Vinicius. It was recorded in Rio because he was very close to Nesui Ertegun, and then the people at Atlantic gave him a license to come to Brazil and record, and it was a very expensive album, by the way. But what happened in the market didn't reflect the quality of the music. I mean, sometimes even when the albums were good, we had poor sales of those albums. Nothing had happened in terms of sales with the João Gilberto albums that are masterpieces. Nobody's discussing the musical quality of those albums. But something was missing for it becoming a product, when art becomes a product also. And some people think that is a kind of heresy when we say that, because, art, of course, but art can become a product without not being an art anymore. You can still be an artistic thing and of high profile, high level, but you need sometimes something additional to become a good product. And Creed Taylor was the guy that really did the connection. Before him, we need to credit two people that I love because they were my friends, two great DJs that were Paulo Santos in Brazil and the great Felix Grant in Washington, that used to have a very famous jazz program in Washington. It was the connection of Paulo Santos and Felix Grant that started everything regarding Bossa Nova in the USA, because it was Paulo, who was a DJ in Brazil. He was the most important jazz DJ in radio in Brazil, had a very famous radio program that gave copies of the Bossa Nova albums, of especially the João Gilberto albums, to Felix Grant. And then Felix Grant lived in Washington, and he was friends with Charlie Bird, that was working as musical director at a place called the Showboat, a famous nightclub where Stan Getz used to play. So during one of these engagements at the Showboat by Stan Getz, Charlie Bird and Felix Grant introduced him to João Gilberto albums. That's how Getz became involved. And then Getz tried to do the first recording, suggested it to Creed Taylor. He had just did a beautiful album called Focus with arrangements by Eddie Sauter. That was the first album that he had done with Creed Taylor in 61 with Roy Haynes on drums. Beautiful album with strings, a string quartet. And then Creed Taylor was once again a visionary because he said, okay, let's try it. And they tried in New York, it didn't work, and then they decided to do the album in Washington, and it was completely done in one day, the Jazz Samba album. And they recorded and flew back to New York in time to have dinner in New York. And what happened, because Desafinado, because a big hit and won many Grammys, was number one pop single. It was something unbelievable for jazz at that time. So really, Creed Taylor and Stan Getz are people responsible for putting bossa nova on the world, on the map of the pop music, of the jazz world, and the biggest influences, because then musicians and audiences finally listened to bossa nova as it should really be played. And that's what was the impact of the listening for João Gilberto. And also we must think that when Phil Ramone is hired as an engineer, because he was one of the favorites of Creed Taylor, he recorded it so beautifully that for me, for example, I prefer the way that, because the voice that was recorded, then the recordings of Brazil, they are far superior in terms of technical qualities, and it's fantastic. And it was Creed, because it sounds, and we have the musicians in top form, because João Gilberto he was already a genius. The man was born a genius. But I think that in 1963, when he recorded the album, he was even more mature. He was even more genius than 5 years before, earlier. And the same with Jobim, and the same with Milton Banana, and the same with John Neto and everybody. So Creed Taylor, really, in the way he packaged the albums, I think, I say in terms of visual aspect, the art design, the album design, the decision to use the paintings by the great Puerto Rican painter Olga Albizu, the vision, the complete vision. He had the vision of the market. So really, we have to take the hat off to Creed Taylor. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Creed had other problems, and Stan and João, everybody. But they were great producers and great manufacturers of the bossa nova art.
Okay, I'm going to play now track number 3. This the GetzGilberto, Pra Machucar Meu Coração. This interest also on the history of Ari Barroso. Ari Barroso was one of the greatest composers. There was Antônio Carlos Jobim really loved and was an inspiration to him, the music and the maestry of Ari Barroso. And they say that Ari Barroso was in bed at that time. He was sick at that time, right?
Yes, he was sick at that time, and he wasn't one of the first persons that liked the bossa nova. He had a kind of reaction and everything, but João Gilberto was so fascinating people that Ari Barroso became completely fascinated with him and everything. And it's interesting because if you read the liner notes carefully, everybody that could have the chance to read the original liner notes of the album, especially the ones by the liner note set written by João Gilberto, there's a reference that as soon as the album became ready and he wanted to play it for Ari Barroso had just died,
So let's play Pra Machucar Meu Coração. This is the Sunday Profiles playing the GetzGilberto. Is 2:52 p.m. and happy Father's Day to everybody. This is WKCR FM New York 89.9 on your dial.
This one, Mike. Yeah, that was the very first one. That was the Grammy Award for producer and best album of the year period was Bossa Nova. It wasn't even at this point the Bossa Nova terminology hadn't been introduced. It was, I called it jazz samba because I didn't know from Bossa Nova.
Right.
And that's why jazz samba.
So at that time you produced jazz samba. You were already being Rio, or no? How you got the connection with
Charlie Bird? Charlie Bird had been. That's a pretty well-known story.
Yeah,
actually,
right.
That the State Department had booked him on a tour of Brazil, and he brought back all this music and brought it to Stan Getz and myself, and his rhythm section had rehearsed it. And Stan and I hopped on a shuttle from New York to Washington, D.C., went in at 12 o'clock, came out at 5 o'clock having finished the whole record, and Stan had never played with this group before. And everything was one take, and everything, by the way, was 7.5 RPM Ampex. That was it. One mic, and the genius compositions of Joe Beam, huh? And Stan Getz, and of course Charlie Bird, having had the taste and the foresight to bring this great music to the United States.
So at that time you had a feeling that you had a hit already in your hand?
No. It came too suddenly. It took a few days after I got back to New York to listen to this music and think, well, what is this clave beat all about, And then, well, what about the melody? The melodies are magnificent, And I always have been a Debussy fan, if you can say that,
Right.
Ravel, Debussy, and that turns out is sort of a basic part of the roots of Joe Beam. We share that common ground musically.
And so the first hit of the jazz samba album was Desafinado. This was the one?
Desfinado.
Desafinado, yeah. So you took off and went to number one.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah.
And this is the one you got the first Grammy for.
Yeah. That is the one that had that very distinctive one note in it, not the one note samba that's also very famous, Joe Beam, But it da 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 da, and Antonio, by the way, while we were talking about this, I know he became known as Tom, but we had a person-to-person understanding that I feel that you're Antonio Carlos Jobim, and I cannot call you Tom. Is that all right? So he called me Creed Taylor for a while, and I called him Antonio Jobim. And then it became Antonio and Creed. Anyway, he explained that one note. I also, by the way, I did not know any Portuguese. That desafinado means slightly out of tune, And that one note is just slightly what you under a half step under what you would expect, Remarkable.
So when you come to record the classic, the other classic, GetzGilberto, at that time you went to Rio? You had any experience in Rio?
No, Rio came to New York in the person of Gilberto, Astrud, Joao, and Luis Bonfa, and so many people that had come in for a Carnegie Hall concert, which I had nothing to do with. But while they were here, Jobim came by my office, and we got acquainted, and one thing led to the other. And he at that time had completed the Girl from Ipanema, but there weren't any English lyrics written to it. So anyway, it was a very natural thing for Jobim and Joao Gilberto with his very romantic guitar and feeling and understated vocal to get together with Stan Getz. So we went in and started recording. Some of these things we're talking about, I know it's sort of well known, but facts, but I guess we'll go through them again anyway.
Yeah.
Astrud Gilberto was able to sing a lyric which was written in English on the spot, The Girl from Ipanema. And she very quickly ran the thing down, and that's what happened. It was not a plan, and nobody sat back and said, hey, this is a song that should be sung by GetzGilberto, because nobody knew her. She just came in the studio one day with Joao and Jobim. Jobim had known her, and it was like a very fortunate meeting that it worked out that way.
Magic.
Yeah.
So, but Norman Gamble already had made the words in English at that time?
Shortly before that, I don't know what the time frame was, but tall and tan and young and lovely. So what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? I remember talking to you the last time when I was here for Caldeira, and then you went one time to Rio.
Oh, several times after that. I've been to Rio to see where all the music came from, and in particular to go to visit with Jobim, who lived, as I recall, on this little hill just above Ipanema Beach. And first time I came, actually, he was in the middle of composing Wave, and he played it half completed, but with his usual enthusiasm, it's like, and I get to hear, and it's like he says, I'm writing it like a wave, it feels like a wave, and that's what it is. But anyway, he was analyzing the whole thing. I don't know how well you knew Jobim or whatever, but he was a very intellectual guy.
Yeah, yes.
Very well read,
Right. I was talking to somebody else about ecology who used to work with Jobim. Said, you don't believe how Jobim was like a biologist. He knew every single plant from the Amazonas, all the animals, all the farm, like incredible guy. Yeah.
And that's sort of part of the reason he got along so well with Vinicius de Moraes, and they're both were extremely well read and worldly people. I mean, aside from being poet and musician, So, Jobim and I walked down this little hill towards Ipanema Beach. It all sounds like a fairy story,
You're in tune with WKCR FM New York,
bar,
WKCR
right
HD, and this is the Sunday Profile with the music of the GetzGilberto album, 60 years of the GetzGilberto album. I just playing a couple tracks of the interview I did with Creed Taylor. This was in the year 2000 for the Antonio Carlos Jobim Fest that we do here every year on January the 25th. But right now we have on the line Monica Getz, the wife of Stan Getz, and she has a new release. It is on Impacts, a beautiful box set of 2 LPs and an incredible material. There is just releases. I think they only press like 7,000 of this box set. But let's talk with Monica right now on our phone line.
Here I am.
Okay, Monica, welcome. Bem-vinda a the celebration of the 60 years of the GetzGilberto. And talk about first about the Impacts release, please.
Well, the Impacts release came about to tell the true story of what really happened and how the album was made. And it's interesting how history changes. I would like to compliment Arnaldo for setting them straight about the bass player and the drummer on the original record. Of course, it was Sebastian and Milton Banana. And how crazy history can change by people making mistakes. Arnaldo, I want to ask you something. How old were you in 1963?
Oh, I couldn't. He's listening Rio, but it's because he's on a WhatsApp. He can listen to you. I will tell him later.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to know, because I think he was just a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, because I was there, and this is not at all how it happened. What happened was that Creed and I were very close, and when the album was made, it was only because I had insisted on the GetzGilberto being made with the original people instead of the jazz samba, because the jazz samba, as wonderful as it was, I knew wasn't the same as doing it with the original people. So what happened is that everybody from Brazil came up here to do a Carnegie Hall concert. And it was really a disaster. And Creed asked me, you go there, I can't go. And so I went, and Carnegie Hall is a natural, wonderful acoustic place. And everybody had brought too many microphones, and there was too many people, and everybody was stumbling over everybody else. But I heard Stan played a separate part. João played one part, and Jobim played another part. And I immediately called Creed and said, you know, the only thing that I could hear that is worthwhile is the possibility of the three of them doing something together. And so Stan was kind of resistant because he did not have a really good experience with Charlie Bird eventually. They ended up in a lawsuit. And the way that Creed described the way that was made, it was exactly how it was made. They flew in, and the next day was Valentine's Day, and Stan had promised me that he was going to do something beautiful and something melodic, because he could do anything. And that was my Valentine, that he went, and nobody, I promise you, and Creed was very honest, nobody thought that that was going to be the tremendous hit that it became. I was in Sweden at the time, and he sent me the tape, and I played it for my grandmother in Sweden, who he also had sent me the focus tape at the same time. None of them were released at that time. And my grandmother was very polite about focus, although that was a very classical kind of thing with strings. But she got up and danced, very dignified countess in the castle. And I knew there was something basic about the Jazz Samba album that could be a tremendous hit. So when I came back, I was in Sweden having the baby. And when I came back with the children, we had this invitation to go to Carnegie Hall. And there I spoke to João, of all people, and João and I just hit it off tremendously. And I went to his hotel room where Stan and I were waiting for several hours. João was a very unique person. And so Stan gave me taxi money to get home, and he took the car and drove. He couldn't wait. So I was just about to take a taxi home from New York City out to Irvington, where I live. And he called downstairs, and I went upstairs, and there he was in a room that looked like it had been hit by a helicopter. Sitting in the middle of this messy little room, he played one song after another. And when I came home, I told Stan, we've got to make this record. We have to make it. So what happened was that João came to dinner and stayed for several years in my house. And he lived on the third floor, and he and João and Astra actually were not very much in love. They were in the middle of a divorce, but they couldn't afford a divorce. And they were upstairs on the third floor, and Jobim would come from time to time within that period. And they would sit in our music room and strum and pick the songs. They played various songs. And that's how the album was done. And Creed would be the first one to say, in fact, I talked to him many, many times, and he gave us all the credit. It wasn't his idea. He didn't realize how big it would be from the beginning. And then, can you imagine, once they made the album, just like any other jazz album, I can hardly even talk about it. The record company, which was Verve, did not want to release it. Oh, he said, the record company president, we've already had the Bossa Nova because, as you told on your program, there were a couple of other ones that had been released. That's for a later time. And no matter how much I tried to persuade him, he would not release it. So it was stuck in the vaults. And what I did then was to get on the phone with the guy that was the head of the Billboard charts. And I said to him, I'm the only person in the universe, but I know that this could change the whole music world. It was made as a jazz album, but there's no reason it couldn't be the top of the charts. And he got very interested. And so I said, how do I get from the jazz chart, which is very small and limited, onto the top of the popular charts in the world? And so he said, bring a pencil and piece of paper, and I will tell you exactly how. And in those days, it was a very corrupt business. The DJs took money, and it was called payola. But they had hired people who would listen to music. So if you didn't pay off the disc jockey, Connie Francis and those kinds of people were played all the time because the disc jockeys were paid off. Every now and then, something would slip through that was really, really good, quality-wise. And so he gave me a list of markets in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And in those days, it was very expensive to call. There was a long-distance call. But I decided to do that, broke as we were. And I called every single person that the guy on Billboard gave me his name and number to in all the big markets, Chicago, LA, San Francisco. And I called those people who did the picks for the corrupt disc jockeys that usually took payola to really play something often. And guess what? All of a sudden, people called me from San Francisco, from Los Angeles. Oh, they're playing this wonderful record all the time. And how come we can't buy it in the store? So I had to try to figure out what to do. So it took a whole year, but I spoke to Creed. And Creed's secretary was a good friend of the secretary of the head of the entire MGM corporation, because it was all in one building, and on top of that was the head of MGM sitting like a big honcho with his feet on the desk and smoking a cigar. And I got an appointment. I had my little 45 record player, I think it was, and played the single that Creed and I had put together on this particular record. And on the backside was So Danza Samba, I think, with Stan instrumentally. And he said, oh, but I've already heard that on the radio, on my limousine on the way in here. And I said, yeah, it's a big hit on the radio, and you're not selling it. And he says, why? And I said, because the bonehead down in the record company doesn't think that it should be released. And he said, took a long look at me and said, do you want this job? And I said, no, I'm in my 20s with children to raise, but if you can get the record out, would be great. He said, consider it out. By the time I took the elevator down to Creed's office, I said, it's going to be out. And we just cheered and just couldn't believe it. And immediately it got out. It got so much airplay everywhere. And then came the Grammys were coming up. And so I spoke to the very grouchy now head of Verve Records, who was beneath the MGM, and it felt very insulted that I had gone over his head. And so he said, well, it's not going to win any Grammy because Hello Dolly is out there, and Columbia has the hold on who votes on the Grammys, and then the Beatles had just come out also. So you can forget about the Grammys. And I said, no, I'm not going to forget about the Grammys. So guess what? I got together, and the packaging that you said, that was me. I wrote the liner notes by Gene Lee's. I asked him to write the liner notes about the whole album, but there was a segment that was signed by Stan. There was a segment that was signed by Joan. And I wrote all of that, and it was so interesting on your program to hear it read back to me, because I had to laugh. That was all writing on my little typewriter in those days. And then what happened was that we went to the Grammys, Creed and I brought Astrid, who was living at my house at that time. They were so poor. We were all quite poor. And everybody was gathering around Barbara Streisand and the Beatles tables. And Creed and I and Astrid sat there a little forlorn. But I remember Johnny Carson came by and gave me a big hug and said, you guys are going to win this for sure. But I think Johnny Carson and I were the only ones who had confidence. But I had some kind of quiet confidence. Stan didn't want to go because he was ashamed. He took pride in not being commercial, and he thought that it would look like he wanted to be commercial. But that album was made completely, purely as a jazz album, and it is fantastic that it did so well. So then I had confidence, and interestingly enough, Woody Herman played in the background, which was Stan's old stomping ground, and Louis Armstrong, who was on the Hello Dolly, came over to me and said, I hope you guys win. It's so much better than what we had. And it was a wonderful atmosphere. And sure enough, they announced that we won. The whole big Grammy thing, album of the year, it was just an unbelievable thing. And I had a speech that I had written, and in the confusion and all of the excitement, it got lost. So I never got to give my speech. But the point of that speech was that quality can win Grammys too, because we had horrible things like Doggy in the Window and that kind of song before. So it was an absolutely unbelievable experience, and very, very few people thought it would be possible even for a jazz album to get up there. But lots of other people need credit. And Creed was my supporter, but he would be the first one to tell you he had really nothing to do with making it a hit. It was these wonderful disc jockeys that each one of them promoted the album, and a lot of people need credit. The man at Billboard who taught me how to reach them, and it all was like a fairy tale.
What about this whole controversy? Who made GetzGilberto made? Why the words in English was already? Tell me, please.
I will tell you exactly what happened. They were living here, Astrid and Jassvan, and they weren't getting along. They had already decided to get a divorce. And but they were playing every night in my living room. I had a fire in my library. I'd like to invite both of you to come and sit in the fireplace in the room where this thing happened. And Astrid sang the English lyrics. And I said, oh, that would be great to have English lyrics on this. And Stan was grouchy because he said, she sings, Monica, to me privately, she sings out of tune. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? Desafinado, as you mentioned in your program, means out of tune. I think it's lovely. And João supported me, and Tom, always the diplomat, didn't make a fuss, but he told me privately he wasn't so sure about the idea. But he was very kind and very supportive to Astrid, too. So we were all trying to help her as best as we could. And we went into the studio, and it was no one there. Now so many people sound like they were in the studio, and it was only the wonderful technicians there. And it was... She sang, we didn't have too many takes, and it was just like apparently jazz samba was. Boom, boom, boom. And in the middle of the recording, I remember João disappeared because he was, if the moon and the stars weren't in the right place at the right time, he was not inspired. So he was outside looking at the stars. And everybody was afraid that we had lost him, but they knew that he had a special connection with me, and I had a special connection with him. And so they sent me down to get him. I didn't say anything. I just took him by the hand and led him back up, and we finished the album. So many people claim to have been there and influenced, and the nicest and the most gracious person about this whole recording and what happened was Creed, actually, because Creed always gave me the credit. Creed was always so sweet and gracious and highly intelligent and not pushy at all. So I would like to respect Creed, but Creed offered me at that time, he said, do you want to have credit as a producer? Because it was, in fact, produced in my house by me and putting all the best songs together. But Creed had a big role in it, too, and it was a wonderful joint effort. And it still, when I think about it, it brings tears to my eyes. How a miracle was created by these wonderful musicians just getting together, thinking of the muses, not thinking about the market, just doing the most beautiful music they can. They were enamored with one another. And these three individually very difficult people, there are endless amount of stories of how horrible Stan could be or how horrible João could be. Jobim was the only one who was sort of a peacemaker, but it was amazing. And the Astrid thing was just a throwaway thing. It was like, yeah, we needed somebody to do the English lyrics. It was a miracle.
All right, and is really in the controversy is still on, and this guy on the independent newspaper, he wrote in 2022, this is Martin Clinton, he made sure that she got nothing. Then the saddest story of Artur Gilberto, the face of Bossa Nova.
It's a complete lie. It's a complete lie. Nobody got anything but exactly what they contracted for. And she was lucky to even be on the album. She was not in a position to negotiate anything. It was ridiculous. She got a career out of that. And, at the time, she was so grateful and so sweet about it. And it was later on that she got in her head that she should have had royalties and that sort of thing. In fact, Stan gave of his royalties to both Jobim, who was making more money than all of them put together from this album, because he wrote, and then when you wrote the songs, you get much more money. And we gave also extra money that was not contracted to Joan. So I don't know where she's coming from, because without this album, she wouldn't have had a career for sure. She lived in this house, and she had this adorable little João Marcelo here. And I remember one time we had a funny episode where he was in the store, and Brazilian store it happened, and he was pointing to all kinds of cakes and touching them, and the woman was really upset. And then he turned to her, Astrid, and said, "That woman is a puta," which is a horrible word in Brazil. I didn't know it. And the woman threw them out of the store. And when I got home, I learned that that is a really bad word. But apparently, João Marcelo had picked it up because they were arguing all the time. They were not deeply in love at that time. So it's a whole other different story than what I hear from you guys. But I was there 24/7. So if you want to know how really that album was made and how it happened, I have the real history. So I'm so glad that you said it straight about the people on the jazz samba, the bass player and the drummer, because that's terrible that the record company can't give credit to who did the music.
Okay, to finish, please, let's promote the release that you participate making now in Impacts. Please, tell the people.
Okay, so the Impacts album is re-released, and it is sound-wise better sound than even the original tape. It's an exceptional thing, and it's a special release that has extended liner notes. It has extended pictures, and it's a very beautifully put together package. So if you can afford it, it's probably the best version ever made of the João Gilberto's and Jobim's and Stan's music together, which somehow became magic, multiplied when the three of them. There was never an argument, never a bad word said between them, and that's very unique for these very temperamental guys, because the music just, they rose to the occasion in a way that a chemical formula does when you have the right ingredients.
Okay, Monica, thank you very much for participating and talk about this iconic album, GetzGilberto, here on Sunday
And
Profile.
I'd like to invite both of you to come here, and I will show you where it was made and where it was conceived and where it was produced, and I will tell you all the backstories, both of you, because you're so wonderful to contribute to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica, once again. All the best. Have a great Sunday.
Okay, thanks.
You are in tune with WKCR FM New York, WKCR HD, WKCR.org across the universe, and this is the Sunday Profiles. And we are playing the music of the GetzGilberto album. We play Corcovado, track number 5, from the re-release of a 1997 CD on Verve. And we play once again by request Só Danço Samba, that we open up with Só Danço Samba as we talk with Arnaldo DeSouteiro, our guest for the day. He also explained that Só Danço Samba was the first recording of the album on the studio with Phil Ramone. O Grande Amor was the last track we played. This is track number 7. From the GetzGilberto album. But we are back, and let me get into charts, the Stan Getz Bossa Nova on the pop charts, the Billboard Hot 100 pop singles, Desafinado on Verve, and was released on 1962, June. He enters the charts 9/29/62 on the highest position reached was 15 weeks on charts was 16 weeks. The Girl from Ipanema 4/64, March 64, and entered the charts on 6/64. In highest position was number 5. Weeks on charts was 12. Billboard top LPs, Jassvan 4/62, 9/15/62 entered the charts, and the highest position was number 1. Weeks on charts 70 weeks. Big Band Bossa Nova 10/62, 12/22/62 entered the charts. Highest position number 13, and weeks on charts 23 weeks. Jassvan Encore 3/63, 5/18/63 entered the charts, and was number 88 on the highest position. Was 11 weeks on charts. The GetzGilberto 3/64, 6/64, and was number 2. In weeks on charts, it was 96 weeks. The 80s, amazing Stan Getz in the Bossa Nova charts, pop charts. And we are back with Arnaldo DeSouteiro, and let's talk about all this action on the chart. You listen again? Arnaldo, once again, let's see. Okay, man, you are on now.
Listening to me?
Yeah, we are together now. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day.
What I think it's impressive. Yeah.
Tell me. It's okay.
It's impressive to see this resume that you did of the charts, because you see a consistency, né? And numbers don't lie. Unfortunately, sometimes. But numbers don't lie, the bank accounts don't lie. And you see a consistency because since the first jazz samba album with Charlie Bird, you see that it was a hit, And then I think also that's always important. I refer to Luis Bonfá because Bonfá is a guy that is sometimes overshadowed today. I worked with him, so many times and for so many years, It's interesting because at the same time I was working with Luis Bonfá and João Gilberto and Jobim and everybody because I was really around them all the time and working with them in recording studios, in TV broadcasts and everything, And so, João Gilberto used it to visit Bonfá, and Felix Grant, when used it to come to Rio, he always met Bonfá and João Gilberto, and I have the pictures with them and everybody. And it's interesting because sometimes the narratives that they use it to tell me, they fit perfectly with one another, And you see that the first time that Bonfá played with Jobim and Stan Getz was in February 1963. It means 1 month before GetzGilberto. That's why I mentioned that the Maria Helena Toledo was the first Brazilian singer to record with Stan Getz. And it was the first time that Stan Getz played with Brazilian musicians because one of the drummers on GetzGilberto, on the Jazz Samba Encore, is Edson Machado, that couldn't be credited because of the same problem with the union. And also other Brazilian percussionists, and Don Payne, who was the guy who was close to Bonfá, also the great bassist that lent his bass player, his instrument to Sebastião Neto to play and everything. And I also was fortunate to meet Astrud Gilberto 3 times. One time with Luiz Bonfá, one time when she performed with João and Jobim on the famous broadcast that we did for Globo TV Network in 92. That was the last time that Jobim and Gilberto performed together. But the moment that I treasure more was one night that I was invited by Duduca da Fonseca and his brother in Brazil, Miguel, to a dinner at Miguel's house, who is a famous architect in Brazil. And Astrud was there, of course. And I was supposed to have dinner and with Astrud, and I did it. But most of all, I took all my albums for her to sign, and she was very, very kind to me, and she signed all the albums, the Verve albums, the CTI album with Turrentine and everything. And so I asked her also some questions, and also the connections were perfect between the stories, And if you see, for example, I would like to mention 3 important quotes. On the liner notes that's on the original GetzGilberto, signed by João Gilberto, and that he told me that, I said this, and Astrud was the one who wrote this. And I said, I mentioned it to Astrud, and she said, yes, of course, because João didn't speak English, so I needed to write for him. That's why she mentions that João Donato was the first person that had showed Stan Getz records to João Gilberto in Brazil. I think the liner notes are very, very interesting to read, and that's why you can notice that they were written after Ari Barroso had passed away, because he passed away on one day, and João Gilberto, the liner notes appeared in the second day and everything. And I have the following here. There's a very important quote from Astrud that is on the liner notes of the GetzGilberto CD that you mentioned, that one that Phil Sharp did the research and everything. And she says, this was the first professional work. I was very young. I was married to João, and we used it to sing at home with friends. I came to the USA with João to be his translator and attend to his needs. The day before rehearsal, Stan Getz came to our hotel, and João said to me, I have a surprise for you. As we was talking with Stan, with me as an interpreter, João said, I think Astrud could sing at the recording. And then she compliments saying, I sang Girl from Ipanema for Stan Getz. And he said, yeah, that's fine with me. I had known him already a few weeks. And at the studio, after we listened to the finished take, Stan looked at me and said very emphatically, that song is gonna make you very famous. And I was not a professional singer. I thought the song was beautiful, but I had no plans to follow it up. After the recording, I went to Europe with Stan and João for several months. We returned to the States on the day that President Kennedy was killed. So it's interesting because for Astrud, she was in a hotel, and then João showed the lyrics and everything. And I also was friends, as you know, with João Donato, worked with him many, many times. And we were friends for over 40 years. And João was the first pianist when Astrud, as soon as the GetzGilberto was done, and before it was released, Stan Getz was so fascinated with Astrud that he invited her to tour with him. And then they recorded a beautiful album that's called Getz Oh Go Go, you know, and it's the one that was recorded live at the club with Rudy Van Gelder and everything. And they were on tour. But when by the end of the year, by the end of 64, Astrud wanted to establish her solo career. So her manager at the time was Monte Kay, that I also had the pleasure to meet, introduced by Flora Purim and Ayrton Moreira to him. And Monte Kay was the one who paid like kind of money, extra money, to have Astrud have her independence, you know, from Stan Getz and start her own group. And the band, her first band was with João Donato on piano, and they recorded on January 65 the first album that is called Astrud Gilberto, the Astrud Gilberto album. That was her first release, you know. And once again, João, and then she invited Dom Romão to tour, and there are many videos on the internet with Astrud and her first band and everything. And I love the numbers because you see that everything is planned. You see, and Creed Taylor, he gave me a test pressing of the album that was done in September 63 with a different track sequence. So just to remember the dates, December 62, Bonfá does his first solo album as the first Brazilian artist that signed with Verve. December 62. February 62, Bonfá and Stan Getz team for Jazz Samba Encore, that is immediately released and stays for 11 weeks on the top charts in Billboard, with Jobim playing on the album as a sideman and Maria Toledo singing. And then in March, we have on two dates, 18 and 19 March 63, the recording of GetzGilberto. And then what Creed Taylor told me, that he wanted also, of course, to record a Jobim album. Jobim had never recorded a solo album, not even in Brazil, where he was famous after the success of João Gilberto albums and everything. He had never had the chance to record an album of his own. And then Creed Taylor decided to release the album. And it was recorded in May 63. And he told me that he saw so many beautiful songs. He was so in love with Jobim compositions that he wanted to introduce them all in the same album. That's how he called Klaus Ogerman to do the arrangements and everything. And Edson Machado is the uncredited drummer on the album. And the first song on the album is The Girl from Ipanema. So he had just released The Girl from Ipanema as an instrumental song. So for Creed, it didn't make sense to release soon after the album in 63, GetzGilberto. So he kept it. He was trying to do test pressings, changing orders and changing the sound and everything. And when he really felt that it was the good time to record, and probably influenced also by all the efforts that Monica Getz did with the radios and the DJ, that was a fantastic job. And the album finally came out. And then when it came out, it was a huge sensation because we had 96 weeks on the Billboard charts, peaking at number 2. Immediately, 2 million copies sold. And to this day, we have 300 issues of the album. I have the album even on Blu-ray, audio, and everything. And we need to talk, of course, about the Grammys. And another thing that is important, the last comment, is that if you take a look on the interviews that João Gilberto gave in the USA for Downbeat and other magazines, and also in the liner notes of the first João Gilberto albums that were released, the person that he seems that was his biggest idol was Jerry Mulligan. He was very close to Jerry Mulligan. And Jobim, too, you know. There are many programs, TV programs, the CBS show with Mulligan playing and everything. And João Gilberto told me that he wanted also to record with Jerry Mulligan. And in one of these liner notes that's signed by Gene Lees, João Gilberto quotes, there's a quote by João Gilberto that when he met Jerry Mulligan for the first time, he said, "I learned to sing listening to your baritone saxophone." Of course, we know that's not a complete true, you know, but that shows the amount of respect that João Gilberto had for Jerry Mulligan too, not only for Stan Getz. And he even told me that he considered doing the album with Stan Getz and sometimes with Jerry Mulligan. And that Creed Taylor told him, "Listen, both are signed to Verve Records. So if you prefer to record with Mulligan, I don't mind. But I would prefer if you record with Stan Getz because he is already doing a bossa nova career, you know, because there were at least 3 albums, Stan Getz albums, on the market and on the charts. Jazz Samba Encore, Big Band Bossa Nova with Gary McFarland, and so it would be perfectly natural that the next one should be with Stan Getz too, you know. And of course, João liked Stan and Monica and decided also to record the album with Stan.
So let's get into the Desafinado. Desafinado is the beginning of the whole thing.
Great idea, yeah, and also because it's the first time that Stan Getz plays Desafinado with the correct chord changes, because there was a problem with the recording with Charlie Bird. That is fantastic, of course, was a hit, but it's not the correct harmony of the song. And the first time that Stan recorded Desafinado backed by Brazilian musicians with the fabulous bossa nova beat of Milton Banana.
No, I'm talking about the jazz samba. You understand?
Oh, you want to play jazz samba? Yeah.
Yeah, we are talking about Desafinado.
Alone, you want to play the Desafinado from jazz samba?
This was the number 1. Okay. I know it's a delay.
Okay, great.
You know, it's okay, I'm gonna play Desafinado. This is from the album Jazz Samba. It is the album. Was the start the whole revolution, and then comes the GetzGilberto that we are talking about. But it's very important that Getz are involved in this album too with Charlie Beard. There was the man who brought the records to Creed Taylor to the U.S. Okay, you listen to Sunday Profiles. Arnaldo DeSouteiro is from Rio de Janeiro, talking about he's a historian, a record producer, the man who knows a lot about Brazilian music and this recording of GetzGilberto also. So let's continue here playing on vinyl. I'm going to play from the box set released in 1984 in Germany.